For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we are talking about the Shudder original movie, Dead Mail. Dead Mail takes place in the 80s and tells the story of a keyboard technician that gets kidnapped and, as a result, unravels this web of complexities that follow in suit and complications with the kidnapper and the kidnappee. I don't even know where to begin with Dead Mail. For starters, this movie is positioning itself as based on a true story with its opening crawl and the way that it sets up its credits, but it never establishes once to the viewer whether or not this was an actual story that took place in the 80s or not. And if that is the case, that this is a true story, that is just absolutely insane to think about all of the elements and how the story kind of comes together. If this is in fact based on a true story, then this story deserves a way better cinematic approach than what we're given here. I think one of my biggest problems with this film is in which it presents its narrative, but I feel like it just feels uneven in that pace, where the first two timelines we see kind of, there's enough shortness in their presentation that it feels like it's asking the audience for intrigue, and then by the time you kind of get to the third piece of that puzzle, it's presented in a more traditional format, so by the time you switch back to another time, you're forgetting that this story is being told in a non-linear fashion. And I think what hurts this movie even more than the way that it presents its narrative is the fact that you're spending an hour and 40 minutes with characters that are never truly fleshed out. Like, they just feel one note, really. Tomas Boykin is a perfect example of this. His character Jasper in this is what they call the dead male detective in this movie, where he basically has a superpower of finding out where missing packages are actually supposed to go. And that's kind of the thing that he's famous literally throughout the entirety of the film. And the only other thing that is presented with him is that he was kind of down on his luck, but even that element is never fleshed out. And that's just one character in a cast of maybe 12, that each one of them seem like they are getting the same exact treatment. Sterling Macer Jr. plays our kidnap victim in this. Josh, one note, is developing a keyboard and a synthesizer that is going to play multiple different options, and he's trying to sell it to foreign companies. That's it. John Fleck plays our antagonist in this movie and business partner to Macer's character. But there's just very little about his character that's actually known. That he's somewhat smart, somewhat unhinged, but it's really the only thing that is ever really known about him. And I guess you can make the argument that that makes him more terrifying, but he's never presented in a terrifying manner to begin with. Dead Mail feels like one of those movies that has really great ideas, but does not necessarily have the best execution of said ideas. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie looks absolutely visually stunning, but this is one of those movies that, again, fuels that argument of style over substance, where it looks stunning and absolutely just breathtaking to look at. The way that they captured late 70s, early 80s cinema is just absolutely mind-boggling. It's so good looking. But again, that element just can only sustain your film for that long. I feel like if a story like Dead Mail was presented with this cinematography in the format of a short film, no longer than 20 minutes, I would be a little bit more captivated by this. But this movie just stretches itself so incredibly thin and just it's, above all, it's just really boring to watch. I can't even say that Dead Male is one of those movies where it has bad performances. It has great performances with a terrible script and terrible direction, with a story that just feels like it should be more exciting than it actually is, and a narrative that should be way more compelling than it actually is, because this movie felt like 100 minutes of just pure boredom for the most part. I think another problem I had with this movie is that it just doesn't commit itself to be as vile and as deranged as it's trying to present itself. Case in point, there's a great gag in this movie that I thought was going to have an excellent payoff, and a couple scenes later, it's just kind of written out. And I was like, dude, like, this could have been a great body horror piece, and essentially you just changed your mind on it. It just furthers the argument on how boring this movie actually ends up being. With that said, I am ready to run Dead Male through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Dead Male a 1 out of 5. This movie feels completely dead on arrival. Aside from its good performances and its rich cinematography, this film just feels aggressively boring and predictable. It never commits itself to being as daring as it thinks it is, and its attempt to present its narrative in a non-linear fashion just kind of shoots itself in the foot by the time you reach the second act. Dead Male begins streaming this upcoming Friday, April 18th, exclusively on Shudder and AMC+. You do not already have Shudder, check it out in the show notes below. You guys can sign up. I believe they're still doing free trials. Unlike most streaming services nowadays, this would normally be the part of the video that I would talk about mental health, but there is such a bleakness to this movie that there is no mental health themes in this film, which is very sad for me to say. But I want to encourage you, if you are someone you know is currently watching this and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, please click the links in the show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. Once again, Dead Male begins streaming this Friday, April 18th, exclusively on Shudder and AMC+. In the show notes below, you guys will additionally find links to our social media, more movie reviews like this, our podcast network, how to support us on Patreon and Paramount+, and that follow button. So until next time, remember to keep it classy and keep it spooky. Have a good night.